إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليمًا كثيرًا أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, I would like to dedicate this talk to every individual who was abandoned by their father. I would like to dedicate this talk to every individual who has loved someone in this world, yet for one reason or another was left abandoned. I would like to dedicate this talk to every individual who has lost someone to death and they couldn't figure out why. The talk is called He Who Has No One Has Allah. And I want you to imagine the following situation. You're 7 years old and you come from a family that isn't well off. You have many brothers and sisters and your own parents cannot afford to keep you in the house. So they say, go and live with your uncle who is going to take care of you. This uncle of yours, he runs a madrasa for young children. He teaches them tahfidh of the Quran. He's known to be a good and righteous man. You go and live with this uncle and he treats you like one of his own children. He loves you and takes care of you. One day, while you're finished the tahfidh class, you're sitting in your room. He comes into the room and he gives you a hug. And that is how it all begins. The next day he comes and he touches you somewhere else. And it becomes more inappropriate, but you're a young child. You don't know what to feel, you don't know what to do, but you know that something is wrong. For 4 years, this continues. And in fact, it actually gets much, much worse. And excuse me for not using the term, but please understand what I'm trying to say. Things get much, much worse. Finally, when you reach the age of 11, you decide that you can't live like this anymore. You need to tell someone, you need to speak out. You go to your parents when you go to visit them. You go to your brothers and sisters, your own blood relatives. You tell them what's going on. And they say, you just have a personal agenda against your uncle. Your uncle runs a tahfidh school. He is the imam of the masjid. He's known to be righteous. You just have a personal problem. And they just absolutely ignore everything you have to say. This individual grows up and cannot have a stable relationship. Every relationship they try to have is sabotaged by the lack of trust they can have in any individual. This individual, now let's bring it to reality, is a sister. She wears niqab, not because she believes it's a religious obligation, but because she believes this is the only way she can live in the world, where she can hide her face and no one can truly know who she is. This sister at the age of 11 tried to commit suicide. She cut her own wrists, yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow her to die. This sister at the age of 19 took an overdose of pills. Again, she was taken to the hospital and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow her to die. And she tried it again, one last time, the third time, saying that perhaps this will be the time where her pain will go away. That was all she wanted. She wanted the pain to be taken away. And that is why she sought out death. She tried to commit suicide one more time. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved her once more. She finally decided to get some help and she contacted me. And I thought to myself at that time, how do you take away this individual's pain? What could I possibly do that I would be able to help this individual? This story became a journey for myself. And as I tried to help this sister, I realized that this wasn't just an individual case. There are people across this world who are living in pain and agony. Different types of pain, different types of agony. But it always comes down to the same conclusion, that shaitan, somehow or another, finds a way to get the better of them and derails them from the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this lecture is dedicated to all of those individuals. I want to start off this lecture by explaining the reality of this world. We live in this world with all of the luxuries, with all of the comforts, and we think that this is what the world is meant to be like. But we fail to realize that even in luxury, even in blessing, this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even luxury and blessing is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is what it all comes down to, that this life is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ راجعون أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن رَّبِّهِمْ وَرَحْمَةٌ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in these beautiful verses, surely we shall test each and every single one of you with a loss of wealth, with a loss of life, with a loss of profit and trade. So give glad tidings to those who are patient. Those, when they are tested, they say, to Allah we belong, and to Him we shall return. Upon those people are the blessings and prayers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And indeed, those are the ones who are truly guided. Now, this lecture started off on a very heavy note. And I know it's very burdensome to feel someone else's pain, so I want to lighten the scene for a little bit. I like to do a small test. And this test is to see how you react to the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this test is called the driving test. The driving test is as follows. I want you to imagine you're a driver in the car. You're all by yourself. You've parallel parked your car and you're reversing out. So everyone, get with me right now, inshallah. You get into your car, you're in the driver's seat. You put your seatbelt on. You look into the rear view mirror and there's nothing there. You look into the passenger side mirror and there's nothing there. You put your foot on the clutch, you put it in reverse, and you're slowly, slowly, slowly backing out. Boom! You just hit something. What was the first word that came to your mouth? For a lot of people, it's a 4-letter word that they wouldn't say in front of their parents. But the reality of this situation is, imagine if you died on that word. Imagine if you died on that word. It was a truck, it came and hit you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to take you away at that time. That was the word that you would have died upon. And this is how you see how you react to the qadr of Allah. This is just a make-believe test that we're doing in the masjid, far from reality. But it happens. People cross the street every day, they get hit by a car. People are driving, they get hit by trucks. People go to sleep at night, and they just pass away. So you always want to pay attention very closely to what the last action that you do is. If you have the ability to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is what you want to strive for. So that was the test. How do you react to the qadr of Allah? You now know where you stand. Number 2, when talking about tests and trials from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, trials and tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are not just the calamities that strike us in terms of death, in terms of loss of wealth, but they're also blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us that we don't thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, and we don't use them in their appropriate means. So this whole talk is about changing perspective, having the right frame of mind, and understanding what is truly going on in your life. If you are not being tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you do not see that test, then now is the time to realize that you're either being tested by pain or you're being tested by pleasure. They both need the exact same result. You turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who is being tested by pain, he seeks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help and finds a recourse out. The one who is being tested by pleasure, he thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those blessings, and he uses those blessings to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Point number 3, when it comes to tests and trials from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have one of 2 choices, particularly when it comes to calamity, particularly when it comes to pain. You can either deal with the pain right now and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you can delay dealing with the pain, seeking the pity of others, seeking help from others, and prolonging the pain without any recourse. And it's very important to understand the cycles that individuals go through when they go through pain. When they lose someone that they love, when they feel betrayed by another individual, the very first reaction they have is to isolate themselves. They want to be alone. Now, this is more significant when it comes to men, because men naturally like to deal with their own pain. They don't like to speak about it. Women naturally like to speak about their pain and suffering, and that's why their first reaction is going on the phone, going to see their mothers, going to see their friends. However, when it comes to true pain, at one time or another, you will try to isolate yourself. And this is the first thing you need to recognize, that this is not what you want to do. This is not a natural reaction, but rather it is Shaitan telling you that you will feel better when you're alone, because you're the only one that understands what you're going through. It is a deception from Shaitan. So while you may need to be alone for a little while, prolonged isolation is very harmful and detrimental to your situation. What you want to do at that time is that short period of time, once you've gotten over that initial rage, that initial pain, then after that you need to get around the believers. You need to get around people who are going to remind you of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want to share a nice story from the students of Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. And this brings us to our fourth point. That fourth point is, it's not about how you live your life in this world. It's not about how you live your life in this world, but it's all about how you will be raised in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is all about how you will be raised. And this alludes us to the point that whatever you die upon is what you shall be raised upon. So let your last deed be your best one. And the story goes as follows. There was a brother who came overseas. And he came to seek a bachelor's degree in any field. And the natural climate was that this was the first time he got freedom from his family. In his society, people are very religious, very practicing. He couldn't have the fun that he wanted to have. So he comes to a place like England. He's in a free mixing university. In a society where no girl looks at you. In fact, there are no girls in your class. Now all of a sudden they're sitting next to you. And you can actually find an excuse to talk to them. Hey, can I borrow a pen? Hey, can I borrow some paper? And conversation becomes very easy. And now that you have a foreign accent, oh my God, you're a fitna for them. And this was the reality that he went through. That he came from a foreign land, and this attraction hit him right away. The initial stages were that he'd just go out for lunch, he'd just go out for meetings, and that is how life continued. He never actually committed zina. One day though, he went to a party, and he committed zina. Out of, pure emotion. He committed zina, and when he was done, he just lay there thinking, I have just ruined myself. And he didn't know what to do. He didn't know where to go. He didn't have any close friends that could guide him. He knew that the only place that this guidance that he had known was back in his hometown. He booked a ticket back to Saudi Arabia where he was from. And on his way, he had a stopover in the country of Qatar. While he's in Qatar, he goes to the musalla, and he's just crying. And you'll see that this is one of the most awkward situations that you'll have. You can think about when you're with people and there's this awkward silence, and it's really weird. What do you do in that situation? What becomes even more awkward is when you see a grown man crying like a baby. He's crying like a baby. What do you do in that situation? One of the students of Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, he saw this man. And he goes up to this man and says, oh man, why are you crying? What's wrong? And he explains to him the situation, that I committed zina and I've destroyed myself. And the only way I can get rid of this pain is if I go back and have the hudud implemented on me. This is the only way I will be purified. The student calms the man down and he says, look, don't do anything rash. Let's go back to Riyadh together and we'll deal with the situation. They head back to Riyadh and the man is still crying throughout the whole journey. He feels really bad for what he has done. The student says, look, we've arrived in Riyadh. Go spend the night at home. I will call you in the morning. Just make sure you don't do anything. Don't do anything. Just wait till I call you. The next morning, the student calls Shaykh Ibn Baz and he asks Shaykh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, ya Shaykh, this